I knew things were going off the rails the moment Carter Briggs opened his first staff meeting with disruptive innovation. The smug trust fund interim CEO, handed the corner office purely by bloodline, had the confidence of someone who'd never missed a rent payment or been told no. I'd been at Vantage for 14 years. I was there when the product was in beta and the office was a warehouse with 2 working bathrooms. Eleanor Briggs, the founder, once told me over bad coffee, "Rowan, systems are the skeleton of any organization. You keep the bones strong, everything else follows." So I did, documenting every process, backing up every contract, leaving a paper trail on every critical decision. My title was Director of Strategic Operations, but internally I was the go-to for emergencies. Procurement deadlocks, compliance fires, legal document hunts. I kept the machinery running. No applause needed, just competence. Then Eleanor got sick. Within months she was gone from leadership and the board, panicked and sentimental, installed Carter. His biggest career win before that. A 3-episode crypto podcast. If you're new here and enjoying these powerful stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Let me know in the comments what part of today's story touched you most. Carter treated Vantage like a LinkedIn stunt, designer sneakers, Slack channels named Carter's Think Tank, and cringy phrases like, ideate synergistically across verticals. My access got quietly revoked. Meetings I used to lead went to his fraternity buddies, guys who confused EBITDA with breakfast burritos. Then I overheard him tell HR I had analog energy. Translation, obsolete. But being underestimated gave me time. Time to dig up the 2010 governance docs Eleanor and I had buried. A fail-safe clause with real teeth. I renewed my notary cert, prepped the execution notice, and started a private email thread titled, "When This Clown Fires Me." I wasn't plotting revenge. I was preserving the foundation he was too arrogant to see. He fired me at 8:59 a.m. on a Wednesday. Coward's timing. Quick touch base, the invite said. No agenda. Just vibes. Carter sat sipping green sludge, flanked by an HR director who couldn't meet my eyes. "We've decided to sunset your position," he said like I was outdated software. Called it a learning opportunity. I blinked once. Nodded. Walked out without my coffee mug. In my car I let out one sharp scream, then opened my banking app. Confirmed the final paycheck hit at 9:02 a.m. timestamp locked. Next stop, the notary. The document, printed, sealed, ready, only needed a stamp. Diane, the notary, scanned the first line, raised an eyebrow and signed without a word. Then came the courier service. I'd arranged same-day delivery 2 weeks prior, marked time-sensitive legal document. The driver asked if it required a signature upon delivery. I told him yes, but only from the company's general counsel, not HR, not Carter's assistant, no substitutes. He nodded, logged the instructions and left. I sat in my car outside a coffee shop across from Vantage headquarters. I didn't go home. I wanted to watch. Through the tinted windows, I saw Carter exit the building an hour later, laughing with someone from product. Probably the same frat buddy he'd installed to run analytics despite thinking a pivot table was furniture. What Carter didn't know, what he couldn't possibly comprehend, was that the envelope now speeding across town contained more than professional grievances or legal complaints. It was a formal execution notice, triggered under Section 5.3 of the 2010 Operational Reversion Agreement. A clause so obscure that even most of legal had forgotten it existed. But I hadn't. I'd helped Eleanor draft that agreement during our incorporation phase. She was paranoid back then, terrified the board might someday prioritize bloodlines over competence. So we embedded safeguards, legal tripwires buried so deep they might as well have been encrypted in invisible ink. I kept copies in triplicate, stored in 2 physical locations and 1 encrypted cloud server. The clause stated clearly, if I were terminated without full board approval and severance compliance per the original charter terms, operational control of Vantage Technologies would revert within 72 hours to the founder's trust, and to the appointee named therein. Carter had just activated a bomb he didn't know existed. And the best part? He still thought I was just yesterday's news. Carter posted a GIF in the company-wide Slack channel that afternoon. A cartoon broom sweeping dust out of a door. Caption, Spring Cleaning SN. Out with the old, in with the bold. Someone reacted with a fire emoji. Another added the prayer hands. I know this because 3 separate people forwarded me screenshots. Loyalty doesn't evaporate just because your badge gets deactivated. From his renovated corner office, which used to be a server room until Carter had it remodeled with reclaimed wood and Edison bulbs, he strutted around like a conquering hero. He'd slayed the dragon in his mind. In reality, he'd just poked a sleeping one with a very sharp stick. He ordered catered lunch for the executive team that day, acai bowls and cold-pressed juice. Someone told me he made a toast about removing institutional inertia. He even unveiled a new org chart titled, The Vantage 2.0 Framework, printed in sans serif font like that was supposed to signify progress. I wasn't surprised. Carter possessed all the emotional depth of a motivational poster. What I was counting on was his arrogance, the same arrogance that made him dismiss the legal memo his assistant slipped under his kombucha bottle that afternoon. I imagine the exchange went something like this. Hey, legal flagged something in the old governance archives related to Rowan's termination. They said it might need review. Carter probably waved it off between sips of his overpriced beverage. We phased out that clause years ago. Let them chase ghosts if they want. Except we hadn't phased it out. Because I hadn't let them. Every 3 years, like clockwork during compliance audits, I ensured that reversion clause remained active, recertified, renotarized, and I had the documentation to prove it. Most of the current team wasn't around in 2010. They didn't know Eleanor's paranoia ran bone deep. They didn't understand that I was the architect who helped design that failsafe back when we both believed Vantage needed permanent protection from exactly what Carter represented. This wasn't revenge. Not really. It was structural integrity. It was continuity. Meanwhile, the courier was cutting through midday traffic, GPS tracking his route as he navigated toward downtown. The envelope in his delivery satchel bore my notary seal, the same one Eleanor and I used when we filed our original Delaware incorporation paperwork. Inside, the notarized execution notice, cross-referenced with board charter documents and a certified copy of Eleanor's trust appointment directive, dated, signed, and filed with the state, completely unaltered. The language was surgical. In the event that Rowan Elise Pierce is involuntarily terminated without documented cause, and if said termination fails to meet severance and board notification standards outlined in Article 6.4, operational oversight shall revert to the founder's trust. Control shall transfer to the trust's appointed successor within 72 business hours of executed notice, barring direct board intervention with unanimous override, requiring the founder's written consent. They had no override mechanism. And Eleanor hadn't signed anything new in over 9 months. Carter didn't know the clock was ticking. He didn't know the courier was 2 blocks away when he posted an Instagram story of himself on the office balcony, caption reading, "Making space for greatness. Let's go." He didn't know legal was already pulling an intern to dig through archived governance binders, the physical ones nobody touched unless I specifically requested them. Back at my apartment, I didn't celebrate. I didn't pour wine or order takeout. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and constructed a timeline old school. 8:59 a.m. Termination. 9:23 a.m. Notary seal affixed. 9:47 a.m. Courier dispatched. By 11:14 a.m., tracking confirmed delivery, signed for by Vantage Technologies General Counsel, Naomi Caldwell. I had a paper trail, timestamps, emails, tracking confirmations, even a recorded voicemail to my personal attorney noting the event, all within the window. That evening, I received a terse email from Naomi. Please confirm whether you have executed the reversion clause as outlined in Article 5.3. I replied simply, executed, time-stamped, and delivered as required under charter provisions. Effective immediately. I signed it "Best regards," because professionalism matters. Then I leaned back, opened a bag of pretzels, and watched the Slack notifications flood my secondary device, the one still linked to a shared alumni channel where current employees vented freely. The whispers had begun. Not full panic yet, but soon. They just didn't realize it was already too late to stop the avalanche. The thing about watching an empire collapse from a safe distance is how quiet it actually is. No explosions, no alarms, just small cracks spreading through concrete while everyone inside keeps sipping their oat milk lattes and pretending the foundation isn't crumbling beneath their ergonomic chairs. By Friday, just 2 days post-termination, Carter had already axed 4 other senior staff members, All veterans who'd been with Vantage since the growth years. Our VP of Client Relations. Gone. The head of infrastructure who literally built our server architecture from scratch. Reassigned to a consulting role, which everyone knew meant fired. The woman who designed our entire onboarding framework while juggling twin toddlers at home. Escorted out with zero notice. That one hit harder than I expected. Her name was Simone. She brought me homemade soup when I had the flu back in 2019. Now she was gone, replaced by Carter's college buddy, some guy named Preston who got kicked off campus for running an unlicensed poker ring out of his dorm. His new title? Chief Strategy Architect. No background in tech, no experience in operations, nothing except a decent LinkedIn headshot and proximity to Carter during their formative kickstand years. Another friend from Carter's past, a guy named Trent, was installed as head of cultural alignment. I wish I were joking. That was his actual title. Inside sources, meaning the handful of brave souls still willing to text me updates, sent screenshots of Carter's morning motivational posts. Legacy doesn't equal relevance, he wrote one morning. We're building tomorrow, not worshipping yesterday. Keep your mindset agile and your ideas disruptive. Someone else sent me a meme captioned, "This is what happens when a LinkedIn influencer gets admin access." I nearly choked on my coffee. From my small home office, nothing fancy, just a desk by the window and decent natural light, I watched the chaos unfold in real time. Someone forwarded me a financial projection spreadsheet for Q4. It still had my formulas, my conditional formatting, my margin notes intact. Carter had simply replaced the header row with "optimized by Carter Briggs." The man couldn't format a cell reference if you paid him in NFTs. Then came the HR blunder. Late Friday afternoon, I received a strange notification. My access to the company's internal HR portal briefly reactivated. Not full access, just a narrow window, long enough for me to glimpse a modified document. My official termination notice, backdated to Thursday, a full day after Carter fired me in person. They were trying to manipulate the timeline, probably to delay the 72-hour reversion trigger or create plausible deniability. Amateurs. Here's the problem with rewriting history. When the historian kept receipts, you're screwed. I had my timestamp, my bank deposit record, the notarized courier slip, the signed delivery confirmation, and my attorney's timestamped reply, all dated Wednesday. I forwarded everything to my lawyer, a sharp woman named Claudia who specialized in corporate governance disputes. She replied with 2 words, "Let them." By Friday night, whispers were spreading through Vantage like wildfire. Nothing loud or public, just murmurs. Someone from engineering messaged my former assistant asking if she had a backup copy of the original founder's charter. Another person from legal called in sick, citing pending document clarification as the reason. One particularly bold IT analyst apparently told Trent the cultural vibes were extremely concerning, after being pressured to approve a half-baked platform migration with zero testing. That night, I received an email from an anonymous Proton Mail account. Subject line: "He's bragging about replacing you with automation." Inside was a screenshot from the executive Slack channel where Carter had written, "Honestly, Rowan's entire job could have been handled by a decent CRM plugin and some workflow automation. We're future-proofing now." Nobody responded to his message. Just a string of wide-eyed emojis. I didn't reply to the anonymous sender. I just saved the screenshot to a folder labeled Ignition Files. That folder also contained a copy of the reversion clause, an audio recording of Eleanor discussing succession planning during a board retreat, and one absolutely glorious video clip of Carter pronouncing fiduciary as feudiciary during a Zoom onboarding session. By Sunday, I knew the countdown was entering its final phase. Carter didn't. He was too busy planning a company-wide rebrand. The tagline, "New blood, no baggage." That slogan wouldn't age well, but it would look fantastic printed across his severance documents. The Monday board meeting was supposed to be routine. A casual quarterly check-in, some underwhelming slide decks, a few vague performance metrics from Carter's newly assembled Vibe Ops team, whatever that meant. The kind of meeting where everyone nods politely while secretly checking sports scores under the table. Instead, it became the corporate equivalent of watching ice crack under someone's feet in real time. It started innocently enough. Carter opened with a standing presentation. literally standing as if physical elevation would make his declining revenue numbers look strategic. He wore a half-zip pullover and chinos, clearly channeling some tech founder aesthetic he'd absorbed from a documentary. "Team," he said, pacing slowly like a TED speaker. "We're disrupting the old paradigms. No more institutional drag. No more legacy baggage. We're lean, agile, and fully optimized. This is Vantage 2.0. The board members smiled politely, the way you do when a child insists on explaining the plot of a movie you've already seen. Naomi Caldwell, our general counsel, didn't smile. She was flipping through a thick accordion folder with the focused intensity of someone searching for a live grenade. She stopped on a page about halfway through and went completely still. Carter didn't notice. He was too busy waxing poetic about vertical integration through decentralized ideation, a phrase that meant absolutely nothing. Naomi finally raised her hand. "Apologies for interrupting, but a legal document arrived over the weekend. Time-stamped, notarized, and delivered via certified courier." Carter waved dismissively. "If it's from Rowan, I already told Angela to disregard the noise. She's just bitter." Naomi didn't blink. "It's not noise." The room shifted. You could feel the air pressure change. One of the external board members, a gray-haired venture capitalist named Lawrence who perpetually tapped his pen against his notepad, glanced up. "Are we talking about a legal issue here?" Naomi adjusted her reading glasses. "Potentially. I'd like to call a brief recess to validate the enforceability of a clause referenced in this document." Carter scoffed. "Clause? Naomi, we deprecated most of the old governance paperwork during the last audit cycle. I was told everything got modernized." Naomi's voice was ice water. "We deprecated templates and workflow documents, not governing charters. This clause predates our digital archive system." The board chair, a no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Hart, leaned forward. "How old are we talking?" Naomi flipped the document around and tapped a signature line. 2010, Eleanor Briggs' Original Incorporation Charter. This specific clause was reviewed and reaffirmed during our 2017 compliance cycle. Signed by Eleanor and ratified by the board. Carter let out a strained laugh. "Okay, great. So Rowan dug up some ancient footnote and thinks she's staging a coup. Come on." Nobody laughed with him. Naomi closed the folder carefully. "This document isn't a complaint. It's a formal execution notice triggered by her termination. It references Section 5.3 of the Operational Reversion Agreement." Evelyn frowned deeply. "Is that enforceable?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. She just said, "I need 45 minutes and a quiet room." Carter tried to salvage his credibility. "Look, this is exactly why I made the call to let her go. She was always a little dramatic, a little stuck in the past." Again silence. He looked around the table, increasingly desperate. "Seriously, you're not actually entertaining this, right?" One board member, a woman named Adrian who ran a successful biotech firm, cleared her throat. "I think we'd all benefit from clarity before proceeding. Let's reconvene after Naomi's had time to review." They stood. Chairs scraped. Papers shuffled. Naomi moved quickly, folder tucked under her arm, her jaw set in determination. Carter leaned against the conference table, arms crossed defensively. "This is exactly why I fired her," he muttered to nobody in particular. "This legacy clause nonsense holding us back." But even as he said it, doubt flickered in his eyes. Like he was finally realizing something had shifted. Like maybe, just maybe, Rowan Pierce hadn't left quietly because she was defeated. Maybe she left quietly because she was ready. And the thing about clocks, they don't stop ticking just because you're too arrogant to hear them. The room felt colder when they reconvened 90 minutes later. Not literally, just spiritually, like the HVAC system had sucked all the confidence straight out of the atmosphere. Carter returned from the break 6 minutes late, clutching an iced matcha, sunglasses still perched on top of his head like he'd just walked off a yacht. He was projecting calm, but even from across the table, you could see the cracks forming in his veneer. Naomi returned with 3 additional folders, one red, one black, one manila, and an expression that suggested she'd just read the final chapter of a horror novel where the monster had been in the house all along. Evelyn wasted no time. "Naomi, your findings?" Naomi remained standing, one hand resting on the black folder. The clause in question, Section 5.3 of the Operational Reversion Agreement, is valid. It was reaffirmed during the 2017 compliance cycle, certified by Eleanor Briggs and 3 board members, 2 of whom are still serving. Lawrence, the gray-haired VC, nodded slowly, clearly doing mental gymnastics to remember if he'd signed something while half asleep during a retreat in Napa. Naomi continued, her voice steady and clinical. The clause was designed to prevent unilateral termination of essential personnel without full board review and severance compliance. If violated, it triggers a 72-hour reversion period. We're already 48 hours in. Carter rolled his eyes and leaned back. Come on, that clause was always symbolic. You told me yourself years ago it was ceremonial, not actionable. Naomi didn't blink. No, Carter. I said it was obscure, not symbolic. And it's absolutely actionable. The severance terms weren't met. The board wasn't notified in writing prior to termination. The founder's trust holds final authority in the event of reversion. He sat up straighter, tension creeping into his shoulders. Wait, you're saying this thing is real? Naomi opened the black folder. Inside was a printed copy of the clause, signed by Eleanor and initialed by me, dated, stamped, and notarized. It's not just real, Carter. It's active. And unless we find a way to reverse it within the next 24 hours, operational control of Vantage Technologies reverts to the appointee listed in the trust. Carter scoffed, but his voice wavered. Eleanor hasn't updated that trust in years. You think she even remembers what she wrote? Naomi's tone sharpened. That doesn't matter. The trust has legal standing. And unless we can produce an updated directive, which I've confirmed we cannot, we're bound by the last filed document. Carter stood abruptly, pacing. No. This is insane. This isn't how corporate governance works. You can't just undo a CO because someone found a dusty binder. Lawrence finally spoke up. You fired someone with direct connection to the founder and assumed the paperwork wouldn't bite back. That's not a dusty binder, Carter. That's a loaded weapon you handed her. Carter spun toward Naomi. Why didn't legal flag this sooner? Naomi remained eerily calm. We did. I sent you an email 10 days before her termination recommending we conduct a legacy document audit. You replied with a thumbs-up emoji and the letters, pull. Silence. The kind that makes your ears ring. Evelyn exhaled slowly, deliberately. So what happens if the clock runs out? Naomi opened the red folder this time. Then the appointee listed in the trust assumes operational oversight of Vantage Technologies, interim or otherwise, until the board votes to restructure the charter. And any changes require the founder's written override. Carter muttered, his voice barely audible. Eleanor can't even hold a pen anymore. Naomi's voice dropped lower. Then I suggest you use the time you have left very wisely. Carter looked desperately around the table. We can contest it. File for emergency injunction. Delay the clause until we sort this out. Naomi shook her head. You'd need standing, which you don't have. The clause explicitly removes authority from the acting CEO in the event of a triggering action. Then I'll contact Eleanor directly. Explain the situation. She's under medical supervision and you're not on the authorized contact list for trust matters. Rowan Pierce is. The room froze. Every head turned. Evelyn turned slowly toward Naomi. Excuse me. Naomi nodded once. She was granted contact privileges in 2019. She's the only non-family individual with access to the trust files and medical proxy authority. Carter dropped into his chair like someone had cut the strings holding him upright. You're telling me she's the one? Naomi didn't answer verbally. He didn't need to. Because even Carter, in his designer athleisure and self-delusion, could finally see it now. The person he'd fired to prove a point had just become the point. And the worst part? There were still 24 hours left on the clock. By Tuesday morning, the walls were sweating metaphorically. Carter hadn't shaved. His usually gelled hair stuck up in chaotic directions, like even his follicles had abandoned ship. He paced the boardroom with the frantic energy of someone trying to speedrun the 5 stages of grief. The swagger he'd worn like cologne had curdled into something desperate and thin. The board reconvened early. Phones off, no assistants, no refreshments. Just 12 people in a room trying to determine whether the company was about to legally devour itself. Evelyn opened without preamble. We've confirmed the clause is active. We've confirmed the trigger conditions were met. The trust is valid. There's no override from Eleanor on file. She looked at Naomi. Which brings us to the next step. Naomi spoke carefully, each word measured. We need to confirm the identity of the named appointee. The Founders Trust designates a successor in the event of operational reversion. She placed a sealed manila envelope on the table, the kind that looked like it could spontaneously combust. This file hasn't been opened since it was placed into trust custody in 2016. Sealed in the presence of Eleanor Briggs, 2 witnesses and a notary public. There is one name inside. The designated successor. Carter let out a bitter, hollow laugh. This is absurd. You're going to hand over company control based on an envelope? What is this, corporate Willy Wonka? Nobody responded. Naomi just stared at him, then slowly slid a letter opener across the seal. She extracted a single ivory sheet, unfolded it. Silence. She didn't read the name aloud. Just paused, read it again, then turned the paper and passed it to Evelyn. Evelyn read it. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture, recognition maybe, or resignation. She passed the sheet to the board member beside her. On it went. One by one, the paper made its quiet, devastating journey around the room. No gasps, no exclamations. Just shared understanding that something irreversible had arrived. Carter's voice cracked. Can someone just say it out loud? Nobody looked at him. He stood up, his voice rising. Say the damn name. Evelyn finally turned to him, her face unreadable. Rowan Elise Pierce. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. No splash. Just a deep, spreading crack. Carter actually stumbled backward a step, like the oxygen had been vacuumed from his lungs. No, that's impossible. She was just operations. She was trusted, Naomi said quietly. He stared at her. You knew. I suspected. But I didn't know until now. Carter ran a hand through his disheveled hair and let out a wild, dry laugh. You're telling me I fired the woman who's now legally in control of this company? Evelyn nodded once, slow and deliberate. Yes. That's exactly what you did. He looked around the room like a trapped animal searching for an exit that didn't exist. We can override it, right? We can vote or... No override without Eleanor's written consent, Naomi interrupted. And as you've been reminded repeatedly, Rowan is the only one with trust access. If Eleanor is lucid and if she chooses to write something different, it has to go through her. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, obnoxiously loud. There were 16 hours left before the 72-hour window closed. 16 hours before control transferred fully, formally, irrevocably. And the name written in Eleanor Briggs' own handwriting wasn't Carter. It was Rowan. The legacy deadweight. The woman he thought he'd pushed off the chessboard. Except she wasn't off the board. She was the board. By 9:15 a.m., Carter had called me 9 times. The first voicemail was cocky, almost condescending. Hey Rowan. Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot here. Let's talk. Water under the bridge, yeah. The second had a slight tremor. I think there's been a misunderstanding with legal. They're kind of spiraling. If you're free, I'd love to clarify a few things. The third was just, please call me. Please. I didn't listen to the rest. I let them pile up like unread emails in a spam folder. No response, no acknowledgement, no signal. Carter was beginning to understand that silence is its own language. And in this case it was deafening. Meanwhile, inside Vantage headquarters, the executive Slack channels had devolved into digital chaos. Legal couldn't contain the leak anymore. Someone, probably a board member, had whispered to a tech reporter at Innovation Wire that a legacy clause was in play and that the CEO's authority was under legal review. By midday, PR had fielded 14 calls from journalists. The 15th came from a local news station that sent a camera crew to the lobby just in time to film an intern having what appeared to be a breakdown near the reception desk. Carter tried damage control. He drafted a company-wide statement about collaborative leadership transitions and elevating institutional knowledge to advisory roles. Legal refused to approve it. They said it could be interpreted as confirmation of lost authority. So he sent an email anyway titled Leadership Clarity. The path forward. Inside, nothing but corporate word salad. No mention of the clause. No mention of the trust. Just a bloated wall of buzzwords held together with desperation. Within minutes, a reply all came through from someone in finance. Just 4 words. Is Rowan coming back? That email was forwarded to me by 7 different people, each with a different reaction emoji. A fire. A crown. Prayer hands. One person just sent a single eye emoji which somehow felt the most appropriate. Back in the boardroom, Carter was clawing at shadows, grasping at anything that might save him. He cornered Naomi near the coffee station. There has to be a way to delay this. Challenge the trust. Dispute the clause. Something. Naomi didn't even look up from her phone. We've reviewed every possible scenario. There's no legal footing. Your only option is Rowan. Then get her on the phone. She's not answering your calls. Then you call her. Naomi finally looked at him and her expression was almost pitying. This is consequences, Carter. You lit the match. You don't get to act surprised when the house burns down. By 2 p.m., a decision was made to inform Eleanor directly. Her health had deteriorated significantly over the past few months. Limited mobility, limited speech, but she was still lucid in brief windows and most critically still legally competent according to her medical team. The trust's executor, a family attorney named Graham Whitfield, flew in that morning. Carter wasn't allowed in the room for the meeting. Protocol, they said. Instead, Naomi went along with Evelyn and Graham. They returned just after 4:30 p.m. The board was assembled, phones silenced, tension thick enough to choke on. Naomi placed her notepad on the table and spoke quietly. The founder has been informed of the clause activation and the pending reversion. Evelyn added, she was shown the notarized documents, the timestamps and the trust directive. Lawrence asked carefully, did she understand? Naomi nodded. Completely. When we showed her the name of the appointee, she smiled. That word, smiled, hit Carter like a physical blow. He snapped. This is insane. You're letting someone from the analog era hit a reset button on a 9-figure company because of what? Loyalty? Sentimentality? I built this place up. Naomi turned slowly, her voice cold and precise. No, Carter. You inherited a chair. She built the chair. The board said nothing. There were 8 hours left. 8 hours until the clause locked into place and the reversion finalized. And Rowan Pierce? She hadn't said a word. Not a press release, not a phone call, not even a cryptic tweet. She didn't need to shout. She already controlled the silence. It was 7:58 a.m. on Thursday when the board reconvened one final time. Same conference room, same table. But this time, every single person seated carried the haunted expression of someone who knew an axe was about to fall and there was nothing they could do to stop it. No one spoke. No one coughed. The legal team was already in position, documents arranged like soldiers in formation. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, tapping her pen against her leather portfolio. 3 soft clicks, then silence. 3 more. The only sound in a room holding its collective breath. At exactly 8 a.m. the courier arrived. He didn't knock. Security escorted him in per protocol for time-sensitive legal deliveries. He walked the length of the table and handed a slim envelope directly to Evelyn. She opened it without ceremony. Inside, a notarized cover letter, a 14-page activation packet, and a flash drive containing the clause validation audit trail. Naomi reviewed the first few lines, then nodded once, decisively. It's done. Carter, standing near the window half-shadowed by the blinds, let out a nervous laugh. So what now? She just waltzes in here like some kind of corporate superhero. As if summoned, the door opened. I stepped inside like I'd never left. No dramatic entrance, no theatrics. Just a charcoal suit sharp enough to cut glass, my old Vantage badge clipped neatly to the lapel, and a single flash drive in my hand, the same one I'd carried for 14 years. The one that held every critical contract, every audit trail, every backup file this company had ever needed. I walked to the head of the table without a word. Every eye followed me. Not because they were forced to, but because gravity had returned to the room. Actual leadership had arrived. I didn't pause, didn't acknowledge anyone individually, didn't smirk. I just sat down. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. The kind of silence you give surgeons before an operation or judges before a verdict. Evelyn looked around the table. Rowan Elise Pierce has assumed operational oversight under Section 5.3 of the Operational Reversion Agreement, Effective immediately. He turned to Naomi. Legal concurrence? Naomi nodded. Clause executed. Chain of command has shifted. Evelyn addressed the full board. Motion to acknowledge and enter this transition into the governance record. All in favor. Hands rose one by one, slowly but surely. All opposed. No one moved. Carter cleared his throat, his voice thin and brittle. You can't be serious. You're just going to hand her the keys? This is my company. I didn't even look at him. I connected my flash drive to the port in front of me and waited as the screen came to life. A company-wide message populated the main dashboard. Title: Steady Hands, Clear Vision. Below it, a concise paragraph about continuity, integrity, and respect for the values Vantage was built upon. It didn't need my name attached. Everyone already knew. Security entered the room without a word, 2 officers in neat uniforms. Carter took a step back. Don't bother, he said, his voice cracking. I'll go. He turned to face me directly. You really think you won? I finally looked up. I didn't smile cruelly. I didn't gloat. I just met his eyes with the calm, absolute certainty of someone who knows exactly how gravity works. Carter, I said softly, nepotism is adorable until it meets the charter. He froze. I stood, walked over to him and handed him a single sheet of paper. His separation agreement, already prepared, already signed by the board. Severance included per the original charter terms he'd never bothered to read. As he took it, hands trembling slightly, I leaned in just enough for him to hear. Consider this your final lesson. He stared at the document like it was written in a foreign language. Then he turned and walked out, flanked by security, his designer sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. The door closed behind him with a quiet, definitive click. I returned to my seat. Evelyn spoke first. Welcome back, Rowan. I nodded once. Thank you. Now let's talk about Q4 projections and that vendor contract Preston botched last week. Lawrence actually laughed, a short, relieved sound. Good to have you back. Over the next 72 hours, I methodically undid the damage. Preston was reassigned to a non-critical consulting role with a generous exit package. Trent, the head of cultural alignment, was let go with severance. Kyle, the frat brother who thought Fiscal Year was a streaming service, was transitioned out. In their places, I reinstated Simone, brought back the VP of Client Relations, and personally called every senior staff member Carter had asked to offer them their positions back with apologies and proper severance for the disruption. Most of them returned. Not all but most. The ones who didn't, I respected their decisions and gave them references that would open any door they wanted. I strengthened our governance safeguards. Unanimous board approval now required for any senior leadership termination, ironclad public severance terms, and real barriers to nepotism. Eleanor passed peacefully 6 months later, surrounded by family. I was at her bedside when she squeezed my hand and whispered, "You kept it safe." I managed only one word, always. At her memorial I spoke of her vision, not just the company she built but the protections she embedded out of love, not fear. And how vital it is to shield institutions from those who inherit without earning. Carter wasn't there. Last I heard, his Web3 consulting firm collapsed in under a year. He's still on LinkedIn preaching about growth through failure. Some lessons never stick. Under my leadership, Vantage returned to profitability in 2 quarters. No rebrands, no hype. Just integrity, hard work, and respect for the foundation Eleanor laid. Every year on that Thursday I reread Section 5.3. Not because I need to, but to remember, the real power lies with those who understand the bones of an organization. Not the loud ones. Not the well-connected. The ones who know where the blueprints are buried. Carter never learned that. But I made sure everyone else did. I chose to rebuild, but they all knew I could have let it fall. And that choice, that was always mine.